9-year-old Lila had everything: wealth, designer clothes, and a pack of friends who followed her every command. But when she tormented a starving stray dog for fun, she never imagined that one day she'd be lying in a ditch, completely helpless, with only the dog she'd abused left to save her. Lila stood at the edge of the sidewalk, her perfectly braided hair swaying behind her like two golden ropes as she tapped her designer sneaker impatiently against the pavement. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across their wealthy suburban neighborhood, illuminating the manicured lawns and expensive cars parked in every driveway. At 9 years old, Lila Martin was accustomed to getting everything she wanted: the latest toys, the prettiest dresses, and unquestioning obedience from her small circle of friends. Her parents, though wealthy, were ghosts in her life. Mr. Martin was always jetting off to some international business meeting, while Mrs. Martin spent her days and most evenings at the high-end boutique she owned downtown. Lila had been raised mostly by their housekeeper, Miss Wilkins, who indulged the girl's every whim to keep peace in the household. This had created a child who viewed the world as existing solely for her benefit, with little regard for anyone else's feelings. Sophia, Noah, and Mia arrived breathless from their homes down the street, their backpacks bouncing as they ran to meet their unofficial leader. They formed a tight circle around Lila, their faces eager for her approval. "Finally," Lila huffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "I've been waiting forever." A sudden rustling from behind the neighbors' trash cans made them all turn. From between the plastic bins emerged a creature so pitiful it barely resembled a dog at all. A German shepherd, its ribs protruding like a xylophone beneath matted, mud-caked fur, limped into view. Its ears were flattened against its skull, and its tail tucked so tightly between its legs it nearly disappeared. The animal's haunted eyes darted between the children, clearly expecting trouble. Lila's nose wrinkled in disgust. "Ooh, look at that disgusting thing!" she shrieked, taking several dramatic steps backward as if the mere sight of the dog might contaminate her. Her friends immediately followed her lead, their faces twisting in exaggerated revulsion. Noah, always eager to impress Lila, picked up a stick and brandished it at the trembling animal. "Get out of here, mutt!" he shouted, his voice cracking with the effort. The dog flinched as if expecting a blow. Without hesitation, Lila bent down and selected a smooth stone from the garden border. With perfect aim, she hurled it at the dog's feet. "Scram!" she commanded, her voice dripping with contempt. The stone skittered across the pavement, narrowly missing the dog's paws. The German shepherd needed no further encouragement. With a terrified yelp, it turned and fled, its emaciated body moving with surprising speed as it disappeared around the corner of the Johnsons' house. Lila smirked, brushing her hands together in satisfaction. "Good riddance," she declared. Her friends erupted in laughter, their admiration for their leader growing. Unseen by the children, old Mr. Harrison stood on his porch across the street, his gnarled hands gripping the railing as he watched the entire scene unfold. The retired schoolteacher's kind eyes darkened with disappointment, his mouth set in a grim line. He said nothing, but the sight of the children's cruelty, especially Lila's, settled heavily in his heart. He would remember this moment. Days turned into weeks, and Lila's mistreatment of the stray German shepherd became something of a twisted game for her and her friends. Whenever they spotted the dog, which seemed to be haunting the neighborhood like a ghost, they would chase it, shouting insults and throwing small objects in its direction. The animal had learned to vanish at the first sight of them, but this only made Lila more determined to seek it out. One unusually warm Saturday afternoon, Lila found herself alone at the neighborhood park. Her friends were all busy with family obligations, leaving her bored and restless. She kicked at the gravel path as she wandered toward the far end of the park, where an old drainage ditch ran along the boundary. The recent rains had left the area muddy and slick, but Lila, dressed in her favorite white sundress and expensive sandals, paid no attention to the warning signs. The ditch was about 5 feet deep with steep, concrete-lined sides. Lila peered over the edge, curious about the trickle of water running along the bottom. As she leaned forward, her sandals slipped on the wet grass. With a startled cry, she tumbled over the edge, landing hard on her backside in stunned silence. Then the reality of her situation hit her. Her dress was ruined, her knees scraped, and worst of all, no one knew where she was. "Help!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Somebody help me!" She tried scrambling up the slippery sides, but each attempt ended with her sliding back down, her hands and dress becoming increasingly coated in foul-smelling mud. Panic rose in her chest like a tidal wave. What if no one found her? What if she had to spend the night down here? Then a shadow fell across the ditch. Lila looked up, expecting to see a neighbor or perhaps one of her friends. Instead, she found herself staring into the familiar, wary eyes of the German shepherd she had tormented for weeks. "Go away," she snapped automatically, her face burning with humiliation. But the dog didn't leave. Instead, it carefully picked its way down the slope, its paws sinking slightly into the mud. Before Lila could protest, she felt its teeth gently grip the back of her dress. "What are you—" she began, but then the dog was pulling, its powerful hind legs digging into the mud for traction. Lila instinctively reached up and grabbed at the grass above, her fingers finding purchase as the dog continued to tug. Inch by muddy inch, the German shepherd dragged her to safety. When she finally lay panting on solid ground, Lila turned to look at her rescuer. The dog stood a few feet away, its sides heaving from the effort, its tongue lolling as it caught its breath. I didn't need your help," Lila muttered, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The dog simply looked at her with those knowing eyes before turning and limping away, leaving Lila sitting in the grass, her ruined dress clinging to her, her mind racing with unfamiliar emotions. For the first time in her life, Lila Martin felt something she couldn't immediately identify: shame. The incident at the drainage ditch marked a subtle but important shift in Lila's behavior. She stopped actively seeking out the German shepherd to torment it, though she wouldn't admit this change to her friends. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she even left scraps of food near the back fence where she'd occasionally seen the dog lurking. One evening in late September, Lila found herself walking home alone as dusk settled over the neighborhood. She'd stayed late at Sophia's house working on a school project, and now the streets were quiet, the golden light of sunset giving way to purple shadows. She was halfway down Maple Lane when she first noticed the footsteps behind her. At first, she thought it might be Mr. Harrison out for his evening walk, but when she glanced back, she saw a stranger, a man in a dark hoodie walking just a little too close. Lila picked up her pace, her heart beginning to race. Down a side street, Lila broke into a run, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The footsteps behind her grew louder, closer. In her panic, she turned into what she thought was a shortcut, only to find herself in a dead-end alley between two houses. She whirled around just as the man entered the alleyway. His grin sent ice water through her veins. "Hey there, little girl," he said, his voice oily. "You lost?" Lila opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She backed up until she hit the fence, her hands scrabbling uselessly against the wood. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the alley, came a sound that made both Lila and the man freeze, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The German shepherd emerged like a specter from the darkness, its teeth bared, its fur standing on end. The transformation from the cowering stray Lila had known was astonishing. This was a predator, a protector. The man took an involuntary step back. "Nice doggy," he said nervously, holding out a hand. The shepherd didn't hesitate. It launched itself at the man, snapping at his outstretched hand. The man yelped and stumbled backward. The dog advanced, its growls growing louder, more menacing. "Call it off," the man shouted, But Lila was frozen in place, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. When the dog lunged again, the man turned and fled, his footsteps echoing down the alley. The shepherd gave chase for a few yards before stopping at the alley's entrance, watching until the man had disappeared around the corner. Only then did it turn back to Lila. The fierce protector was gone, replaced once more by the gentle stray. It approached her slowly, its tail giving a tentative wag. Lila, still shaking, sank to her knees in the dirt. "Why? Why did you save me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The dog nudged her hand with its nose, its eyes soft and understanding. As Lila buried her fingers in its matted fur, she felt something warm and wet on her cheeks. Tears. "Thank you," she breathed, pressing her forehead against the dog's. In that moment, something inside Lila shifted irrevocably. The girl who had thrown stones at this creature now clung to it like a lifeline. When they finally left the alley together, Lila walked slowly, keeping pace with the limping dog. She didn't know it yet, but their story was far from over. The digital clock on Lila's bedside table glowed 1:17 a.m. when the first sound woke her, a faint but unmistakable clink of glass breaking downstairs. She sat up in bed, her heart immediately racing. The house was dark except for the moonlight filtering through her curtains. Another sound, the creak of a floorboard in the hallway below. Someone was in the house. Lila's breath came in short, panicked gasps as she slipped out of bed. Should she wake her parents? Their bedroom was at the far end of the hall, past the intruder. Her hands trembled as she reached for her bedroom door, opening it just enough to peer out. The faint glow of a flashlight beam moved in the living room below. Lila's mouth went dry. She could see the silhouette of a man, tall, wearing dark clothes, rifling through her mother's jewelry box on the dresser. The silver necklace her father had given her mother for their anniversary glinted in the thief's hand before disappearing into his bag. Without thinking, Lila gasped. The intruder's head snapped up. Their eyes met through the darkness. Then, crash! The living room window shattered inward as a blur of fur and fury launched itself at the burglar. Hero. The German shepherd's powerful jaws clamped onto the man's arm as he screamed in pain and surprise. "Get off me, you mutt!" the burglar roared, swinging wildly with his free hand. His fist connected with Hero's ribs, producing a sickening thud. The dog yelped but held on, his body taking the punishment as he protected his family. The noise woke Lila's parents. She heard their bedroom door fly open, her father's voice shouting, "Who's there?" The burglar grabbed the fireplace poker from its stand and swung it with all his might. The metal connected with Hero's back with a terrible crack. Hero's howl of pain filled the house as he collapsed to the ground. Lila screamed, her voice piercing the chaos. "Hero!" Blue lights suddenly flooded the room as police cars screeched to a stop outside. The burglar, realizing he was trapped, made a desperate lunge for the broken window, but Hero, despite his injuries, lunged once more, sinking his teeth into the man's pant leg and holding on with his last ounce of strength. The next few minutes passed in a blur, police officers swarming in, her parents clutching each other in shock, the burglar being handcuffed and led away. But all Lila could see was Hero lying motionless in a spreading pool of blood. She fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. "No, no, no," she sobbed, her hands hovering over his broken body, afraid to touch him and cause more pain. "Please, Hero, please don't leave me." Hero's tail gave the faintest wag as his eyes met hers. Then they fluttered closed. "Somebody help him," Lila screamed, her voice raw with desperation. Her father was already on the phone calling the emergency vet. As he scooped Hero's limp body into his arms, Lila noticed Mr. Harrison standing in their doorway, his face pale with concern. "I'll drive," the old man said without hesitation. "Let's go." The fluorescent lights of the all-night animal hospital buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the nearly empty waiting room. Lila sat curled in a plastic chair, her knees drawn to her chest, her tear-streaked face pressed against the stuffed unicorn she'd grabbed in her panic. The unicorn's rainbow mane was damp from her tears. 23 tiles made up the floor pattern. She'd counted them 3 times already. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness, each second stretching into an eternity. It had been 2 hours since they'd arrived, 2 hours since the vet had rushed Hero into surgery. Mr. Harrison sat beside her, his gnarled hands resting on his cane. "That's one tough dog," he said quietly, breaking the tense silence. "Takes more than a coward with a poker to finish a hero." Lila's mother stroked her hair. "The doctor said he's strong, sweetheart. He's fighting." But Lila couldn't stop seeing it, the way Hero's body had crumpled after that second blow, the awful pained whimper he'd made. She buried her face in the unicorn's fur, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I was so mean to him," she whispered, her voice thick with guilt. "I threw rocks at him. I called him names. And he still—" Her words dissolved into tears. Mr. Harrison placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Dogs don't hold grudges, Lila. They live in the moment. All Hero knows is that you're his girl, and he loves you." Just then, the surgery doors swung open. A tired-looking vet in green scrubs approached, her face unreadable. Lila's whole body tensed, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Then the vet smiled. "He's going to be okay." Those 4 words unleashed a flood of emotions so powerful, Lila nearly collapsed with relief. She leaped up, ready to run to Hero, but the vet held up a hand. "He's not out of the woods yet," she cautioned. "We've repaired the worst damage, but he lost a lot of blood. He'll need weeks of recovery." The vet hesitated. "And his right hind leg, the bones were shattered. We did everything we could, but he'll always have a limp." "I don't care," Lila burst out, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Can I see him?" "Please," the vet nodded. "Just for a minute. He's still groggy from the anesthesia." Lila followed the vet through the swinging doors, her parents close behind. In the recovery room, Hero lay on his side, his body swathed in bandages, an IV drip attached to his front leg. His breathing was shallow but steady. Kneeling beside him, Lila carefully touched his head, avoiding his injuries. "You came back," she whispered, "just like you always do." Hero's tail gave the faintest thump against the table. His tongue lolled out in what might have been an attempt at a lick. Lila pressed her forehead gently against his. "I promise," she whispered so only he could hear. "I'll never let anything hurt you again." Hero's homecoming was an event the entire neighborhood came to witness. After 3 weeks at the animal hospital and another 2 with the Martins visiting him daily during his recovery, the vet finally declared him well enough to go home. The morning of his return dawned crisp and clear, the autumn leaves swirling in golden eddies around the Martins' front yard. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors who had followed Hero's story, friends from school, even the local news station that had picked up the tale of the heroic stray. Lila had spent the weeks of Hero's absence preparing. She'd used all her saved allowance money to buy the fluffiest orthopedic dog bed the pet store carried. Her art project, a carefully painted Hero name sign with paw print decorations, hung proudly above his food and water bowls in the kitchen. She'd even convinced her parents to install a special dog door so Hero could come and go as he pleased. When Mr. Harrison's car pulled into the driveway, the crowd erupted in quiet applause. Lila's father carefully lifted Hero from the back seat, the dog's body still wrapped in protective bandages.
Lila rushed
his
forward,
right hind
then
leg
stopped
in
herself,
cast.
remembering the vet's warnings about being too exuberant.
"Hey, boy," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Hero's tail began to wag furiously at the sound of her voice, his entire body wriggling with joy despite his injuries. As her father set Hero down gently in the living room, the dog's nose twitched at the scent of grilled chicken Lila had spent the morning preparing just for him. His tail gave another feeble wag when he saw the mountain of new toys piled in the corner. Kneeling beside him, Lila carefully avoided touching his bandaged leg as she stroked his head. "Welcome home," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. Hero responded with a slow, gentle lick across her cheek, his warm brown eyes filled with nothing but love. From that day forward, everything changed. Lila, who used to sleep until noon on weekends, now rose at dawn to take Hero on slow, careful walks around the block. The girl who once threw stones at strays became the neighborhood's most passionate advocate for animal welfare, starting a donation drive for the local shelter. And every night as she curled up with her loyal protector, her hero, Lila understood the profound truth. She hadn't rescued him. He had rescued her. In saving her life, he had given her something far more precious, a heart capable of compassion, courage, and unconditional love.